It's without a doubt one of the most difficult political jobs in our country, being the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. The Conservatives have had 3 leaders since 2015, and they lost 3 elections. Stephen Harper, Andrew Scheer, Erin O'Toole. Now it's time for a new leader, and the party will choose one in early September. Lots of interesting candidates jumping in. Take a look at who's running so far, and this list likely will grow. Pierre Poilievre, Leslyn Lewis, Jean Charest. Recently, as of this weekend, Patrick Brown, as well as Roman Baber as well. Let's bring in our commentators to give us their take on what lies ahead for the Conservatives in their leadership race. Cam Holmstrom for the NDP, Susan Smith for the Liberals, and Andrew Brandrew for the Conservatives, who I'm going to start with. Andrew, a whole lot at stake here if you guys want to win elections again. Your thoughts on the state of the race 5-6 months out?
Yeah, look, it's going to be a long race, but as we're seeing right off the bat, lots of interest in the top job. And I think what's really nice about this, at least in the early days, is that Conservative Party members are going to be presented with a clear choice. A lot of these candidates represent very different views. And they're starting to demonstrate those to members very clearly right off the top of the leadership. So I think there's actually a lot of energy, a lot of optimism for Conservatives to take their pick and decide what kind of path they want to send the party down in the coming years, and which path is best to take on the Liberals in the next election.
Susan, I know you're not going to admit this on national television, but I've heard that your party, the Liberals, are the most concerned about Jean Charest winning. I mean, here's a guy who was briefly the leader of the Progressive Conservatives, won 3 elections provincially in Quebec, a lot of experience, perhaps a better shot at winning more seats in Quebec and Ontario than Erin O'Toole did, that you guys are worried about Charest. Well, what can you tell me?
I fully admit that. I'd fully admit that. Charest is a moderate. He's been a premier and he's been a leader before. But back to your first question to Andrew, I think whomever wins this party is going to need to be a part-time medic with a serious first aid kit, because so far this is turning out to be a bloody brawl. Like, if you thought Rocky looked bad walking out of the ring, wait till you see the Conservative Party at the end of this process. Pierre Poilievre is in a bare knuckles brawl with everyone. 15 minutes ago, we put out a tweet saying Patrick Brown was lying. So whomever wins this Conservative Party, if they haven't turned off the electorate, they may have turned on their party members, but turned off the electorate, they are going to need to do fence mending within the Conservative movement and then present themselves as a reasonable, viable party for the opposition. So yes, the Liberals are concerned about Jean Charest. If he wins, that's a conversation. If Pierre Poilievre wins, that's a real statement about the future of the Conservative Party, I think.
Yeah, we've heard the Liberals are not as concerned about Pierre Poilievre because they think he's going to lose an election, the 4th one the Conservatives would lose if that were to be the case. Cam, let's bring you into the conversation. Patrick Brown, also a moderate. Jean Charest, a moderate. But as you know, when it comes to the Conservatives, in some cases, their base prefers ideological purity to people who may actually be able to win elections.
Hence the problem the Conservatives face right now. And as Susan laid out very nicely what you just saw before we came on, I saw Patrick Brown's tweet. Sorry, Pierre Poilievre's tweet about Patrick Brown, and I thought to myself, you know, Pierre Poilievre loves to say that Patrick Brown will say anything to get elected, yet Pierre Poilievre has shown that he'll say anything to get elected. Neither's a good trait for a leader, if you ask me. But obviously for them, yes, there's that purity piece. And that there's a problem with that. You have to find a way to put water in your wine to bring people together. And the way I look at it is that if this race continues like this for the next 4 or 5 months, I don't think it's going to matter who wins this thing. Because how is it that you stay in? If you're Patrick Brown and you're being beaten over the head, or you support him, and you're being called these kind of names in the first week, how do you feel if Pierre Poilievre wins? Do you actually stick around? Jean Charest is being tarred and feathered as well by Pierre Poilievre. Again, like, to me, how do you stay in if he were to win, and then vice versa if either of them were to win? I think the key thing here is that, though, I think the important thing, this is the fight the Tories have needed to have. These have been the strains and stresses within this party now going on probably about a good decade now, ever since they got to majority government. Like, how far do you go? How much purity do you need? How much do you water yourself down? And I think that's just where the pressure is right now. What I'm blown away by, though, to be very honest, I was expecting there to be elbows up. I wasn't expecting this to be kind of like Fight Club, except we're talking all about it because they're talking all about it. It's just out there. And seriously, where do you ramp up from this? Like, what's it going to be next? Pistols at dawn? Like, come on, guys.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I know that Andrew Brander, as the Conservative here, is trying to be very diplomatic. But can I ask you about the Pierre Poilievre potential problem here, if I can term it that way? I mean, I've heard, and you know, there is a perception out there that he can be mean and vicious and nasty, and that there are people in his own caucus who don't like the guy. How concerned are you about him as leader, or do you think if he was to win, Andrew, that he would be able to change the tone that we have known in some cases from Pierre Poilievre and become a unifier and rally his party around him and bring Canadians from the centre who decide elections over to your party?
I think Cam and Susan make excellent points. And I would say that, look, it is going to be a long campaign. So I would encourage every single one of the leadership candidates, when they want to engage in these types of contrast, messaging, to consider that aspect of unity at the end of it. However, one thing I do know is that the thing that unites Conservatives the most is certainly going to be that ambition to beat Justin Trudeau. And as Cam pointed out, I couldn't agree more. This is a battle. This is a conversation that Conservatives need to have now. It's better that we're having it now. And Conservatives, quite frankly, are tired of losing. They want to see some people who are able to, make that contrast clear during these types of races. And Conservative, that's going to speak to Conservative Party members. So I'm not all that concerned about the contrast pieces going on right now.
The challenge for your party, Andrew, as you know, and I got to get Susan to weigh in here, is that, the people who actually decide leaders are not the same people who vote in general elections. I mean, they are, but a lot more people vote in general elections. So, if you appeal to your base, maybe you're the leader, but maybe the party picks somebody who cannot actually win. And the other thing, Susan, I'm curious about is, we're nice, kind, compassionate Canada. These sort of Twitter wars and these attacks and these vicious sort of throwdowns, how does that go over with Canadians, do you think?
I think it leaves a very bad taste in people's mouths. Apparently, Pierre Poilievre is registering nowhere with most women. And to your point, Todd, you could win the leadership and win the party, but lose the election. You also, in the case of Pierre Poilievre, could lose your seat. He was in support of the convoy in Ottawa, and the people in his Ottawa riding, his suburban Ottawa riding, are not happy about that. So he's got to watch his flank there. You need to pay attention, and you need to have a broad appeal. That's the difference. I think there's going to be so much damage at the end of this. These are not contrast ads that we're seeing. These are attack ads. The Liberals, quite frankly, think that's great. I mean, go ahead, rip apart your opponents. It's not healthy on the whole, I don't think, for the Conservative Party. The other thing with Poilievre, his campaign has been the harshest to date. And at some point, he's using surrogates to do the mean stuff. Mind you, this tweet where he calls Patrick Brown, that says that Patrick Brown is lying, has come out of his own account. So I don't know how he growls and bares his fangs in one end and then tries to say, please come give me a cuddle and vote for me when it comes federal election time.
Last word goes to you, Cam. And I can't help but think that, for somebody like Jean Charest, maybe the strategy now is going to be, I am going to play the elder statesman here. I'm not going to get down in the muck with Pierre Poilievre or others. I'm going to try to rise above and look prime ministerial, because we know Charest has always wanted to be Prime Minister of Canada going back decades.
And you know what? That's a good strategy on his part. The fact of the matter is that he has a track record. Like, to me, that's a beautiful contrast between he and Poilievre. Poilievre has been elected for 18 years, and his greatest achievement was getting himself reelected every time. Whereas Jean Charest ran to be Premier of Quebec to save the country, right? He ran balanced budgets in Quebec. Like, you can point to stuff, and there's a lot of stuff there negative too with him that you can point to. But it's all baked in at this point as far as I'm concerned. People know who Jean Charest is and know what his baggage is and know what you're getting. I think the problem for Charest is he has to bring in all these people from the outside. And as someone who's attempted to do that before, it's not a very easy sell. It's not an easy lift to do. The one thing I'll keep in mind, though, with this, a little bit of advice that messaging advice I learned from Jack Layton back in the day, going back to the 2008 campaign when the New Democrats were asking Liberals to lend Jack their vote, right, to hold the Conservatives in check. They were very careful about not actually attacking Liberals and openly saying Liberal, 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 because there were a lot of people who happen to vote Liberal, who may identify as Liberal, who were open-minded to voting for the NDP at the time, who thought, hey, you know what, I might give them a chance. And if you attacked them that way, it made them get their back up, made them feel unwanted. I couldn't help but think of that when I saw Pierre Poilievre's attack ad on Jean Charest and Patrick Brown, where he used the word liberal very liberally a few dozen times in the ad. And again, if you're that voter in the general public, you know what, are you thinking, do I feel safe here? Do I feel comfortable here to give this guy my vote? I don't think so. And I think that's the key thing for the Conservatives to realize. If you guys had enough votes in the tent to win government flat down, you'd already be doing it. You don't. You need to bring it in from the outside. Where's it going to come from? And if it's going to be coming from that area. So who's best able to do it? I don't think it's Pierre Poilievre, but you know what? There's many months left for him to change his tune. Lord knows he's done it enough other times in his career.
Mm-hmm. Hey, good to see all three of you on this Monday. I look forward to more spirited conversations on this in the
long campaign.
Yeah, in the months to come in the long campaign. Thanks again.